Good afternoon from yammybtv. Wishing you all well today. Sending loads of love as usual. The subject raised for this afternoon is a matter of past and present again, tinged with, as we always have on yammybtv, bits of sadness because we're talking about having a voice when we're younger and not being listened to. Now things are very, very much different because, you take, all right, we use the institutional setting of a police force. In the early days, there wasn't no cameras when you're knocking on doors to raid people's houses. You just knocked on the door, caved the door in, went in. And they had this thing where when you get to the police station, they do contemporary notes long before you're interviewed, long before you're in front of the sergeant's desk, or the sergeant says to him, oh, have you got your contemporary notes of what took place during, the early moments of being arrested, kind of thing. So if you say, he said when I woke him up out of his bed and he said, oh yeah, no, where was you yesterday? Oh, I said I was, so straight away, he's making up a lie. Where you said you had jewelry. Where did you get that from? Oh, you said you got it from there, but you didn't. But he's making up his own story in his own head because he's of the opinion, or he's aware that you are the one that's committed the crime. He wants to get you banged to rights, so he's going to write his stuff. But he's going to need somebody else with him, another police officer, who writes similar contemporary notes. So that when you're in a court going on trial, when you're disputing things, they say, well, what happened when you went through the door? Well, I went through the door at 8 o'clock. It was about 5 minutes past 8. I woke him up and he said that. And then another officer comes up onto the stand and he says, yeah, I was there. Well, what did he say? Oh, he said something similar to the one that the other police officer just said. Very similar in nature, that, he said similar things as he got out of bed. So there's the verification and there's the backup. And in them days, what a police officer said most of the time was sod's law, God's law. Yeah, definitely true. Because if one said it and two said it and three said it, they can't be lying. It must be true. So you didn't stand a chance. Now you can't get away with that so much. Same with the tape recorded interviews. In the old days, it was statements and you had to initial this and sign at the bottom. And if you didn't sign or you did sign, there was ways around that as well. Because they would say, well, why didn't he sign it then? If he agreed to it, there'd be arguments as in, well, it's not signed, so they made it up themselves because they couldn't forge the signature. They say that an unsigned statement would mean that you didn't write it. It's them that writ it. That would be supposed to be more in your favour, but not always so either. But I noticed in institutions, not just police forces, not just the prison establishment, because they do the same when they do adjudications, when they're spinning you, when there's, fights that take place, or, you get into a fight with an officer and he just lumps you for no reason. There'll be an officer on hand by most of the time to say, well, that inmate swung first. We had to restrain him. There was no other way of doing it. He got the bruise by this way because he was tangled up and my hand was on top of that. And, there was basically no way out of it because we were just doing our jobs. But again, verification from another officer adds more weight to the situation that took place by the officer in question that really assaulted you, but is trying to find a way out of not getting reprimanded or even losing his job because he needs his mate. Remember, I backed you on that. You backed me on this. Same with doctors, nurses, even when you're in those establishments, mental institutions, and you kick off or whatever, there'll always be someone again to say, even if they jumped on you with seat situations where they jump on you for no reason, and they've been caught on camera doing it, but you're the baddie again in a position where you're not meant to be mentally right. Whatever they say is, oh, well, he wasn't mentally right. He was in a bad way. He can't really remember what he did, but we did the best we could. We had to restrain him or inject him with something, to keep him calm and for the safety of others. Like I've been in situations where I'm saying, look, I'm having real problems at the moment, and I stand up and they all start backing away, making it look like you're about to react violently, where my head's more screwed on, and I say, well, look, why are you all backing off from me? Because I'm not going to attack you or anything. And they're, but they're overplaying it, because they want to get you into a position where they can say, oh, we were terrified of him. No, 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 no. Too old school. In one of the early days, you got me like that, but not in later life. And once again, we go back to childcare. Childcare, again, you didn't have a voice. Many are suffering today with that, with what they went through at school. And your school would have to have suffered. If you're suffering whilst you're in the care of others, right? So when you go to school, if you got a bad home situation with mum and dad, or you're in a children's home and you're getting things happening to you there, your schoolwork's going to suffer, because you're sincerely hurt. When you get into that classroom, you might not be telling everyone. Most suffered in silence, to be fair, until some came out with voices and didn't really get believed, I'm afraid. And a lot of stuff got swept under the carpet. We know a lot about my stuff, but having interacted with many of you over the last month and the last year or so, find out that many suffered at the hands of, the people that I suffered at the hands of, where we didn't have a voice of our own and we wasn't believed, and our trust in authority to start with is going to be zilch, and our trust in general with others around us is not going to be as bad as the ones where the mistrust came from, but you're still going to have a position, a feeling rather, of not being trusting much around you, it's fair to say, because the hurt that you suffered when you was younger has carried on into later life, and behavior, attitudes, and the development into your maturity and later years, those things never leave you. I talk to a lot of people that now don't really hang around with human beings. Many say that I've got animals as my best friend, because I lost so much trust with those that were around me, where I got used, abused, and led to believe, and advantage taken off me. It's an all familiar story from back in the day. Very soon we're going to have microchips, so I'm hearing, and nothing else is going to matter anymore, because everything's just going to be logged down anyway, if you get what I mean. So none of the past or the things that I'm talking about are really going to have much worth anyway. But I would have liked some of them that have had to pay for their sins in earlier life, where 30, 40, 50 years later, those historic crimes have caught up with you at a time when you're vulnerable as an old person, thinking that you got away with what you got away with all those years ago, like a child who's innocent at the time, who ain't got no say, who's vulnerable at that time. You're the same in later life, because now you've got a stick, you can't walk properly, and things are very difficult from day to day with you, and the last thing you want is to have the guilt of what you did, if you've got a conscience even, of those things that happened to you. You're going to have to suffer at some stage, because God always has it that what's in the dark shall come to the light, and the same way you caught your victims at their weakest, so it shall be that you get caught when you're at your weakest as well. So good luck to you, and many of you will have to suffer. I have no sympathy for you on that. But the voices and the effects of your schoolwork and going into school every day with those problems hanging over you, played a part in your development of where you're going to go in life. Because if your home life isn't good, if you're in care, and you're in them days, it wasn't like loads and loads of us that was in care. There was a selected few. So you'd have, say, the third year and fourth year, and there'd be about 3 or 4 people that are in care. Now it's probably a bit more if you get what I mean. But you would get the mickey taken out of you for being in care. You know, children can be very, very horrible at times and say, look, your mum and dad didn't want you. You know, that's going to hurt you. See, you're in care and you can't stay out late and we can. And, you know, all of the things that a child can say to hurt you are going to hurt you, because the situation that you find yourself in isn't something of your own doing. You're a victim of your circumstances and your environment, which is a familiar thing that is being said to me every day by those, and I've got a lot on my WhatsApp that suffered badly and are not, like you said yesterday, Ian, are not ashamed of what happened now. Because you're when you're innocent and you're young and you're small, you're not fit enough to say no, or to know the difference between right or wrong. Or all you know as human beings, no matter what age, you have a sense of something not feeling right. You know, like I explained in my story, I used to always know that it wasn't right what the person was doing, but to say no, and you know, the reasons why you can't say no leaves you into has a trait in later life that makes you feel that you were a people pleaser, that you struggled along the way because of those early developments and the way that you were left to be felt, that you struggled with being able to tell people, no, I don't want to do this and I don't want to participate. But I'm a firm believer that, not just saying it because of my case, I believe it is a very, very true thing, that what you felt when you was younger by not being able to say no and resist can leave you a very weak man, or when you're older, a very angry man, because you couldn't fight back at that time. And now that you can, you become, you know, violent with it. Or like with me, it didn't really make me violent towards, you know, victim in the same way that the way the things happened to me, but I did take it out on other people without thinking of their care and what they would have to go through by way of consequences because of my actions. You know, I didn't take it as much, well, what I was doing, I didn't even look at it that by, you know, some of the crimes I committed now, when I'm looking back, really, really bad, you know, what you're putting people through, you know, searching through their belongings, nicking personal things, the things they have to go through at the hands of people like me, frightening people and learning that form of intimidation. The same way that you felt frightened as a youngster, you're projecting it as you get older because it works for that person in the way he made you feel. So you're believing we're not doing the same things that they did, but it still mounts up to the same kind of behaviors by getting what you wanted by way of fear, or, you know, there's many of you that can put it a bit better than me in that way. But your schooling, yep, it would have had to have suffered. Talking to someone this morning, you know, you're underdeveloped, you're overdeveloped. Those are the exploitations, you know, where those watching the predators from the sidelines, yes, that one be all right for me, and or whatever tickled their fancy and what they did, oh, he looks innocent, or they look ready for, you know, to be one of my victims. In all forms, whatever shape the human mind takes with that warped behavior, you know, which gives them the upper hand because they're adults. And as a kid, really, you know, when you're being told off, you know, there were many that rebelled, you know, that saw the signs and spoke out very, very early. But again, nothing got done about it. You know, you're sitting around explaining what happened and they're all looking at each other saying, we don't really want to open up, because what that means is if we go with him, that means that our establishments are, you know, going to be put into question, and there's a chain of events of people higher up that it's going to reflect on. So again, they're thinking about saving their own asses by way of, you know, protecting, if you like, the ones that are doing wrong. So they've got blood on their hands, and when all these inquiries happen years and years later, your name is going to get called if you're even if you're alive now. Many have escaped now in later life because you're not here to face the punishment for your crimes, you know. But God catches up with you in different ways, if you get what I mean, because I don't know how the rest of your life have gone since. But you know, if you're not the perpetrator, but you know that you hid the perpetrator, you know, by covering up, you know that even if you're not that bad as he was, you would have to have some kind of guilt that you allowed those things to happen on your watch. Same way with the police. When people have died in custody, some didn't want to play a part, but because you're part of a team, you wouldn't want to, your senior will say to you, no, you've got to back him. No matter what, whether you believe what he was right, whether it was unnecessary, whether he went over the top and he killed him, you know, you have to say what you saw, but what you didn't see, so that he doesn't get into trouble. But at some stage it could come back to bite you. These days, not so many are going to be so free and easy to take the risk, because it's much more easier to get found out now. But what else? There was something else I was going to say, but I always get confused with this sort of thing. But coming up again in a minute, you know, this is just a light warming one into future things that are coming on yammybtv, where a lot of victims will be coming on my show to explain their story and about exactly how they felt and where it left them in life. And many now, we come out and we fight back. We have to go back now to say that we weren't defeated at the hands of you. If anything, we're going to come out the better people, because we're highlighting what happened during those early 70s and 80s when all this stuff was swept under the carpet, because many of you will have to feel the shame that we originally felt, because there's nothing worse than you being found out because you had the power to do as you pleased. But in later life, when that's now coming to light, that power that you thought you held, as now you've become a sheltering lamb in the corner now, squirming and crying your eyes out, that now you're a victim of your own crimes. So you're a victim of making victims, but you become a victim because now you have to run for cover because you're being stoned to death for the things that you've done. Sod's law. Good luck to you. I'll be up shortly. All right, sending loads of love.